of martyrs, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers, not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers, so the wicked, they are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish.
Are that's where the alignment is between Grimm and I.
Okay, so what is bringing down the fourth wall project, Grimm?
A terrible spell, and part of that spell, the humans have the campfire circuitry. For whatever reason, probably because it. So like, the television engages that, and like that's when your tribal elders are passing on information and stuff. So like those things are hijacked and make everybody feel like their audience. And like if you watch characters in series that do break the fourth wall, and that's what the fourth wall I'm referencing when I do it. It's the wall that behind which you are audience and not a human. So
okay.
Hashtag paintball for Jesus, @GrimGrizz, hashtag break the fourth wall.
So like you do like break the fourth wall that doesn't exist and be like,
break the fourth wall a little bit.
you really helped me break the fourth wall. Like, it's just people.
Good poetry is definitely always trying to break the fourth wall.
Always tried, as GrimGrizz says, to break the fourth wall to the degree that I can. All right, here we are. Thank you for coming this morning. I thought I might do question and answer. Usually the first Friday of the month, I use question, and I take my questions from the Bridges of Meaning Discord. I thought this morning I would just take them directly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link in the chat. There it is. I'm going to pin the link. YouTube, come on. Yeah, there we go. Now I can pin the link. And what I'm going to do is there's a limit to how many people can sort of queue up in StreamYard, but I will try to take first come, first serve at some point, because this is going to go on a while. If one of you comes in and I think you'd make a good co-host for me, so I can do a bunch of things, and then we can have more conversation with the question. We'll do that too. And look at this. We have one early take.
Boy.
You are the first one in. I've broken the fourth wall, and here it is. So, well, you're gonna have to tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're not familiar face.
Yeah. So, excuse me. I thought I'd be in a waiting line here. You're a popular guy on these. So, anyways, happy Friday, everyone. My name is Joseph Lambrecht. My username here is my last name in the Anglo-Saxon form. But Paul, we actually have talked way back in the day, like 2017, 18. So really long time ago. It's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. It was a quick randos thing. But anyways, I wanted to hop in because I'm actually in so I'm in the Holy Cross Seminary diaconate program, and I'm in my final year. And so it's basically a 3-year program, and it's to train guys who want to better serve in their parish and possibly go on to become ordained as a deacon in the Orthodox Church. And I guess my question to you, I don't want to be rambling on here, but my question to you is what is the purpose of a seminary? Because you Calvinists, you love your seminary education, right? You're very astute with all sorts of manners of learning, and you think of a Calvinist pastor, I'll just say Reformed pastor. Your duties primarily, I would say your duties are primarily pastoral, right? You're visiting the sick, counseling and whatnot, and you do provide teaching. You have a sermon, so there's that pastoral element. There's the I guess intellectual sermon, and then your liturgical participation or leading, right? You correct me if I'm wrong, but as a Reformed minister, you are the one that will pray before communion, right? Do you allow lay participation for that? Or okay, so but still, I look at those 3 aspects, right? You have pastoral, teaching, and liturgical. There's probably a fancy name for all 3 of those things, but in the Orthodox scheme, right, it's liturgical is probably the most important aspect of a seminary education. Then teaching doctrine, and then pastoral work, right? But I've thrown a lot out already, but I just want to hear what your idea of the seminary is in that regard.
Great question. That's a great question. So I made a little short of this. Now, a word to JWH. I'm going to need to see your camera on before I let you on, to make sure, number one, that your camera works, and number two, that you've got skin in the game and you're breaking the 4th wall. So just to comment to you, we've got one other person in the queue. There you are. All right, good. Okay. That's a great question. At the German Breakwater Festival, I made a speech. You can find the video on my channel. Both I've mixed it up a little bit. One of the things I thought about when I was thinking about that speech, and I was thinking about the little corner, is that over time, there's been a shift of focus in the different traditions with respect to what they saw was sort of as the center of ministry. And so the center of ministry, I think, for the Orthodox has tended to be liturgy. Now, all of the traditions have done all of the main things. They've all done teaching. They have all done pastoral care. They've all done liturgy. They've all done Eucharist. And you could add a few things to that. But Orthodoxy right now, when I listen to the Orthodox, I hear liturgy, liturgy, liturgy. And what you just said sort of confirmed that the number one thing in deacon training for you is you've got to do the liturgy. If all else fails, that's what you need to be able to do. And
if I may interject real quick,
sure.
The thing about liturgy too is you can't just open up a book and here you go. You know, there's a lot of motion and, you know, oh, does this guy go here or, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah. It's not so clear cut.
Because your liturgy is embodied.
Yes.
And your sacred space is three-dimensional.
Yeah.
And it's intentional. I've been actually doing a lot of thinking about the relationship between temple worship in the first and second temples, tabernacle, first and second temples, and Orthodox liturgy. But I'll save that for now. So the focus for you, all of these different traditions are going to prioritize different things, even though seminaries in a Protestant world are outgrowths of the university. The universities are outgrowths of the monastic movements. Now, it's not incidental, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's not incidental that for Orthodox clergy that work in local parishes don't usually ascend up the hierarchy. It's the monastics that take the place in the hierarchy.
Right. However, today that practice is a little it's a little interesting because you can go you go to seminary and you are a single guy and then you decide, I'm going to go get my PhD in this language, Greek or Russian or whatever, and then they'll make you a monk for like 4 months, and then you're elevated to a bishop, or you're made an archimandrite, and you're put in a holding environment as like, I'm the dean of this seminary, and that's a holding zone for you're going to be made a bishop once, you know. So there's a lot of when you say that, it's like there's a way to idealize it, but there's also just admin.
There's the reality.
Yeah.
So Mark makes an important point. Your university grows out of seminary because the question then really is, what is a seminary? And traditionally, of course, the root of the word is semen, which is seed. And seminaries are supposed to be seed beds for the leadership of the church. And so the different traditions and what they prioritize in their seedbed will be indicative of the larger body and where it sees its priorities with respect to the clergy. So your question about Reformed seminaries has tended to be homiletics, preaching. That has tended to be the number one thing. I remember when Neil Plantinga, Alvin Plantinga's younger brother, who was a professor of mine at seminary, he became seminary president for Calvin Seminary for a time. And I remember when he was talking about his vision for the seminary, he said, I want our seminary to be known as being a place that has developed great preachers. I see right there the priority of that tradition. Now, when I went to seminary, you could already, in some ways, now when I talk about the recession of modernity, these things are so massive. It's not like, it's like a tide that recedes, because when the tide may be receiving, but you might have a group of waves that come in and makes it looks like you can only see recession on over long periods of time. And so what's been happening in Protestantism, as we're, I think, reaching the end of the particular protest that has been going on for 500 years, has been a lack of confidence in preaching. Now, one of the things that I saw in Tim Keller was a revivification of confidence in preaching. And that was one of the things that really struck me when I looked at Tim Keller. And part of why I really saw that in Keller was it was clear with Keller that his sermons were doing the converting. Okay. Now, I think in Orthodoxy, for many who are coming into Orthodoxy, it's the liturgy. When I listen to them, it's the liturgy that's doing the transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that the places that are getting the most buzz are environments that can foster a beautiful, prayerful, liturgical environment.
Yep. Yep.
And even right now, some of the best engagement any Orthodox YouTube channel gets right now is actually a channel called Orthodox Tradition. And they are Greek Old Calendarists. So they're not in communion with any of the world Orthodoxy because of participation of the World Council of Churches and all this other crazy history. But they get 3-digit viewers for their live streams of Vespers or something, that is not even a major thing. And people are flocking to it because it is engendering a certain ethos. And, so it's all about what is going on in the liturgy. So,
yes. So generally speaking, Protestant seminaries tend to prioritize preaching, the kerugma, the proclamation of the word, and then the rest of it is sort of scaffolded up to there. So theological and doctrinal formation, theological education and doctrinal formation have tended to be key. Now, part of what has been happening in Protestant seminaries is that in the United States, universities were founded by denominations and specific traditions. And so so when Mark says universities grew out of seminaries, he's right, especially in the American scene. And it's true in the Christian Reformed Church. They first founded the seminary, and then they founded Calvin College to be a prep school for the seminary. And then they needed to train Christian school teachers, which were often women.
Yep.
So that's the next thing that they had at Calvin College, and everything sort of grew out of there. And you see this on the American scene that first they founded the seminary to do theological education, and then everything grew out of there. But now when I was going to seminary, I would say that the crisis of preaching was already sort of well underway. And so there was a big,
was that in the 70s or the 80s?
80s.
80s, okay.
Many seminarians were losing their confidence in preaching, and they were looking for pastoral care.
Yeah, okay.
And if you look at the conversation I just did with Graham Dempsey about modernity, what happens in the main line is the main line sort of hollows out. Liturgy stayed in the main line because one of the interesting things about main line was
oh my goodness, it's so weird. It's so weird. Yeah, church
theologically,
completely
liberal.
Yes,
but they continued to focus on liturgy.
Yeah.
But the church hollowed out in terms of preaching, and so the church would tend to devolve into either political activism or therapy. And so that tension was in seminary in the 80s with me. A lot of people were like, all of this theological education, this isn't what's important. What's really important is pastoral care, the therapeutic. And so that wave was going on in the 80s. And then sort of church planting happened. And what happened in Protestant, especially young, restless, and Reformed circles, was that when that sort of brought preaching to the fore again, because a lot of Protestant church planting was about a certain kind of preaching, but also big box music. And that became liturgy for the seeker church. So are all of these elements, and then many seeker churches, because they were Zwinglian, Eucharist became like nothing.
Yeah,
but then there were other churches like Church of the Servant and the Christian Reformed churches, Anglican churches, that began to elevate the Eucharist. So what you see are these various elements of the life of the church sort of taking precedent back and forward in different aspects of the tradition, and then that gets reflected in the seminaries.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
Super great question.
So just one quick follow-up then. What do you think lies in the future for the current Orthodox model? Because to give you some insight here, the main seminaries in America for Orthodoxy are, Holy Cross in Brookline, Massachusetts. You have St. Tikhon's, which is in Pennsylvania. That's Orthodox Church of America. St. Vladimir Seminary, that's in New York, Orthodox Church of America. And then you have Holy Trinity in Jordanville, New York. So all these things are in the upper East Coast, right? Now you have all this swelling of these, Protestant converts, atheist converts, you name it, whatever, in the Midwest, in these more rural areas. And just something that is striking is you have all these clergymen that are similar to the your denomination. You have this old guard that is going to be retiring shortly, and how are you going to replace that leadership? And I see it very strange that you're going to demand some guy in rural Iowa. You got to go to Brookline, Massachusetts for 5 years, spend $200,000, and then you can be a priest and come back and serve the liturgy. What is going to happen there?
Yeah. So that crisis has been happening in Protestant churches already. And that crisis has been in the Christian Reformed Church for the last 20 years. Because prior to 20 years ago or so, if you wanted to be a minister in the Christian Reformed Church, you had to move to Grand Rapids. You had to spend 3 years in Grand Rapids.
Wow.
And Canadians in particular, they would come in and they couldn't work. And so that's part of what was behind Redeemer. But then you had in the Christian Reformed Church alternate tracks to ministry, where you could get an MDiv, a Master's of Divinity, in another seminary. And then you also had the rise of, just like we've had the rise of non-denominational churches, we've had the rise of non-denominational seminaries.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And so, and no, you're exactly right. And another interesting tidbit was that in the Christian Reformed Church, in seminary, when I went through, we had near zero preparation in liturgy.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Near zero. To the point that when seminarians would get out of seminary, now you had a fair amount of field education, and the assumption was you're going to pick up your liturgical stuff in your field education. But we had a little class on Reformed liturgy, which is pretty simple. And again, it was near zero. But what was also interesting was that in the 1970s, so Church of the Servant now in Grand Rapids is a particularly interesting church because it's sort of become a cathedral church for Grand Rapids. In the 70s, with guys like Nick Waltersdorf and a bunch of Calvin College intellectuals that were into aesthetics, they were exploring liturgy. And one of the transformations that has been happening in the Christian Reformed Church over the last 50 years has been a renaissance in liturgy. But that renaissance has been caught in the same battle in the Christian Reformed Church between assimilation to the main line and assimilation to the evangelical. No, your question is great. And like you just pointed out, for things to work in the world, they have to work at all the different layers. They have to work for people's economics. And that
distance element, I think, is the biggest barrier to entry right now for anyone becoming Orthodox, because, you said previously, I think you said you recommend not going to a church more than like 15 minutes away or something, which is a brilliant, brilliant point. I drive like an hour and 20 minutes to get to church.
Right.
And that's insane. That is totally unsustainable. And, I think Orthodoxy is something that can appeal to, like an 80 IQ to 140 IQ, except for try going to a pipe fitter, who's questioning about things. And he, you're like, oh, well, you come to this Orthodox church 50 minutes away. And it's like, really? I got to do this. But anyways, I could go on and on about this. One last thing I'll say, it's interesting when you think of how this phenomenon is tackled in the old world. I've heard it be said that, in Greece, if you want to be, there's a distinction between a city priest and a village priest. A city priest will go to Thessaloniki, study for 3 to 4 years. Village priest will go to Athens for 8 months, and then you're back in it, and you're right in the trenches. And I personally think we need to embrace the village priest mindset and just go, especially for the Orthodox, where we're liturgy mode. I think there's nothing more important. So anyways,
I'd love to continue this conversation. I really would,
yeah.
because I think that Orthodoxy in America is going to face many of the same challenges that every church faces, just by virtue of culture, economics, all of this. And
the dynamics you're describing, though, Paul, what's crazy though is you have all the so right now, I swear this is my last thing. You have all of these you have all this, the GOA, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, is by far the largest Orthodox representation in America, and they have the most infrastructure. And what's funny enough is that there's a very large divide between this swelling of converts coming in with the Greek hierarchy, with the Greek infrastructure, with the Greek academics, and even maybe the Greek population. And so you have this disparagement between these two, and it's like the Greeks have all the infrastructure, and it's disproportionately out east, and none of their kids are staying in the church, and then you have all these people coming in, and it's like you said in I think in a past video, I don't know if this was you, they all mixed together. It feels like we're in 1913. What's going to happen with this cultural clash here? So, anyways.
Well, thank you so much, Joseph. And now I'm gonna. Grim Grizz suggests we're thinking PVK is too soft to host a thing of this nature. Well, maybe so, and that's why we try. So I'm going to take you out of the room. I'm going to bring somebody else, but then drop out so more slots can be. I'll try to be. I'll try to be economical.
Right. Take care, Paul. Thanks.
All right. Oops. Oh, nope. Sorry, John, you're third. Okay, JWH, you're up. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. I haven't practiced this in a bit. Hi. I'm dropping in on this because I've never caught you drop a link right at the exact time that I'm watching. So it happened for the first time. Don't have any particular question, but I've been listening for years, and I really appreciate all that you do as far as processing your thoughts online and allowing us to react to it. I've dropped in on the Discord every once in a while, but I really haven't figured it out too well. You may look around me and see I'm a high school teacher, and I happen to be on my planning period, and I happen to be getting some things ready. So I just decided to pop in. I know your wife's a teacher too, so I figured you might understand that.
All right. So you don't have a question?
Not too much, but might just comment on. I felt spoken to about the liturgy topic that you addressed a moment ago, because I'm Catholic myself and have gone through the whole experience of being a young adult and dabbling into atheism, etc., and felt for a bit that might make more sense to me, and then it didn't after a while. So I have kind of a cerebral approach, or need to think things through. That's why I appreciate this little corner so much. I need some holes poked to my axioms here and there. Just to fix them. And anyway, I've been dating a woman now for a bit that is probably Episcopalian leaning. So that's a different tradition than what I have. She's most comfortable with that tradition simply because it's the most liberal tradition she could find. Whatever that means now. I know that's a term that fudges, etc. But they're right next door to the Unitarian Church in my town.
Yeah.
And anyway, they're right in there, and they collaborate a lot. But I've been going there. But it's really interesting because my girlfriend is a musician as well, and she knows a lot about the old mass and the old rites. And this Episcopalian church has a lot more old music and old rites than what I am used to in my Catholic tradition. And
that's because again, the main lines tended to preserve the liturgy, which is fascinating.
Right. Agreed.
So it's ironic that if you're a Protestant, even if you're conservative, but you really love liturgy, you're going to be probably going to a very liberal church, and you probably get to participate because these churches are dying like crazy, leaving these massive buildings.
Yes, yep, it's wild, and this too has been interesting for me. Your video is frozen on my end, so I don't know if mine's still working for you.
Yeah, I still hear you. I still hear you.
Okay, good, it fixed it. I'm in the upper South / lower Midwest. So I'll give you an idea. Kentucky, Indiana region. I've lived in both places. Also, I'm a linguist of all things. I lived in Europe for over a decade, so I unexpectedly speak several languages. Language teacher, etc. So I've had to assimilate into different cultures. But it's been interesting transferring over into this Episcopalian center because I tell them I'm Catholic and they say, "Oh, that's so metal. Oh, you must be so hardcore or so conservative." But not really too much. I'm interested to see where the conservatism and the liberalism shifts to in the different churches and in the different communities. And this one in particular is bringing in a lot of young people, which I'm very surprised by, because in this Catholic tradition where I've been for the last about 9 years after I moved back from Europe, it's been mostly older folks. I'm the only one that's like under 50 in my congregation usually. And they've been asking, "Where you been?" And I said, "I'm going with my girlfriend at this other church." But I go to Catholic mass during the week, and then I'm Episcopalian on the weekends. And she plays some Presbyterian churches as a musician sometimes. So Maundy Thursday, which is a term I just learned this year, we're going to be Presbyterian. I think Sunday we're going to be Episcopalian. Friday we might be Catholic. I don't know. So yeah, I know that isn't always well received, but I'm open to trying different things. I usually score pretty high on the openness. But yeah, so one thing before I just go on and on, because I'm kind of nervous, as you may tell. This feels like I'm talking to a bit of a celebrity here with PVK on the line. I know you're probably used to getting starstruck people, and that's me right now. But this particular church has all these old rites, but they also do drag shows, for example, which I have not been to, but would be interested in seeing how they handle that. Not something I want to go to repeatedly, not something I want to necessarily invite anybody to, but I am interested that somehow they're pulling this off.
Go to the Episcopal Church for the liturgy, but you gotta tolerate the drag queens. This is, I did this conversation about metamodern Christianity. This is it. This is what we are going to be facing. So,
and all the flips we've seen throughout these just couple years since you came onto my radar have been wild. Never saw them coming. And then my pastoral experience has been in Catholic Franciscan churches, and a lot of the like stereotypes within Catholicism, I've been met with a lot more gentle approaches from the pastoral side. I want to say, like I've had great priests in my life that really canceled me through a lot of different difficulties individually, and have really taken time for me.
Yeah,
and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And one of them is in his late 80s, and they recently moved him from the church he had been at for like 20 years. So I still meet him individually, but I'm just not at the parish that I was at.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've taken up plenty of time here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Keep on doing what you're doing, and I enjoy listening to y'all.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. All right, John.
Good morning, Paul.
Good. How are you?
It's good to see you again.
I'm
doing well.
Good. What's your question?
My question, in his heyday, Christopher Hitchens was probably the best atheist, best spokesman for the atheists. Yeah. And to me, his strongest steel man on his side was that he was a humanist, and he believed that abortion was murder. And he would ask every once in a while, "Do you believe in abortion?" And if the Christian said no, he'd say, "Well, then aren't you condemning all these human beings to eternal torment?"
Yeah.
Because a good portion of them won't if they live their lives, they're not all going to go to heaven.
Right.
But if they all get aborted, they all go to heaven.
Yeah. So what's your question?
Well, my question is, it's the same question I've asked before. It's just a different way of trying to understand how. And I know that, our whole society is built on the Christian tradition, that without Christ, the Declaration of Independence is probably the most powerful and best political document ever written. And it is because that document puts it in black and white that we get our rights from God. We do not get our rights from the king or from any human. And that's got to be correct. I mean, even if that's not right, it would be best to act that way. That's the thing I think Jordan Peterson says, that, and he's probably shifted a little bit, but they constantly ask him, do you believe in God? And he finally settled on, I act as if he's there.
So John, you got to have a question for me. You're a known quantity here, so I'm not looking for a randos conversation. So do you have a question, or is that something you wanted to say?
That's something I wanted to say.
All right.
Sorry, I guess.
That's okay, John. That's all right. Thanks for coming on. I'll just again make the note that when I drop you from this, it's good to drop out of the waiting area down below to get off of StreamYard so that more people can come in. Because Grim Grizz is rightly concerned that I'm going to be way too soft on all you people. So
I understand.
It's good to see you, though.
I understand. You need the justice and the
That's
mercy.
right. That's right.
We got to both be there.
PVK, he's just way too soft until he isn't, and then he's way too mean. That's always the way it goes. Take care, John. Good seeing you.
Thank you, Paul.
Hey, Dale.
Hey, Paul.
How are you?
Pretty good. Doing
good. What's your question?
First, got two quick questions. One was from your first conversation.
Okay.
Has to do with way back in school. If I remember right, the primary piece of the pulpit of the CRC is the preaching. Therefore, they put the pulpit center, the communion table out in front type thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that also sort of answers the question, why the seminary? Because the key to CRC is the preaching of the word. Therefore, you need all the knowledge, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That just piece along with the liturgy, because I'm now in the Lutheran church, which has that reverse, which I happen to just be looking up. What does it take to do communion? And you have to be ordained to give communion, because I forget the word they use, but it's basically uttering the preface to giving communion. What Jesus spoke type thing has to be done from a preacher only.
Yes. So if a Lutheran church, so my wife, my father-in-law, her father, who was killed when she was young, he was a Lutheran minister. And I remember visiting the Lutheran church in Little Town in Eastern Michigan. And that Lutheran church had a rather famous little altar. It's a little church, but as an altar. And again, you're exactly right. All of this architecture reflects the more in churches. So you're exactly right. Generally speaking, often in Protestant churches, the pulpit will be the main deal. And then in Christian Reformed churches, there'll be a table where there's communion. In a Lutheran church, you'll have an altar. And, and then, of course, with Lutherans, it's that's sort of in tension. But obviously, in an Orthodox or Catholic church, the altar is the main thing. And then the homily is a separate thing. You're exactly right. So was that your question, Dale?
That was just the question I had since I was watching. The first question has to do with your discussion of catechism that we used to have back in the CRC. I'm like you, went once a week to catechism, had to go before the council.
I was in an urban church, so we had it for Sunday school.
Okay. So my question is, what is it today in most CRCs? I grew up first CRC Orange City. So I'm sort of curious, what's the standard for catechism? Because in the Lutheran, my daughter's going to catechism classes right now. They learn it in school from first grade on. They're reciting catechism for the Lutheran, which is the small catechism, which is much simpler than the Heidelberg ever was. But what is the current structure today in the CRC?
All over the map. So it's interesting because after I made that comment, I heard from some CRC people that said, we still have midweek catechism. Other Christian Reformed churches, you're not going to find the catechism even if you're looking for it. And I would say, generally speaking, there's a whole bunch of other trends that you're going to hear. So Richard is in here talking down the CRC because he's Richard, a particular Richard that is a brother of a particular more well-known person in the corner here. But you will find, let's say, if you go to a CRC that looks like a seeker church, then you're probably going to, if any catechism is there, if they're using even CRC materials, it'll be way down deep, perhaps beneath their Sunday school, their middle school and high school curriculum. The catechism will be under there. Now, it's helpful to remember, and I'm still thinking about how to do catechism things on my YouTube channel. It's helpful to remember that, generally speaking, catechisms touch on a few standard elements of the Bible. They'll touch on the Apostles' Creed. They'll touch on the Lord's Prayer. They'll touch on the Ten Commandments. They'll touch on, so in other words, catechisms by their structure themselves try to give sort of an overview into the Bible and the Christian life. And so what you'll find in Christian Reformed churches now, that there'll be some places still teaching the catechism directly. There'll be some places still doing catechism sermons at night. And there'll be other Christian Reformed churches where you'll be really hard pressed to find or identify the catechism.
If I remember right, I mean, it's been a long time since I studied the Heidelberg Catechism. If I remember right, it's pretty much just a theological framework / beginning to end, how you get from original sin to salvation.
It's an application of what the tradition sees as the heart of Christian teaching.
Okay. Well, yeah, same thing I'm saying.
Yep. That, and so again, Apostles' Creed, Lord's Prayer, Ten Commandments, sacraments, and then they'll get at things like holy living through the Apostles' Creed, which are in the gratitude section. So I'm actually getting more and more excited about doing some stuff on the Heidelberg Catechism in my channel. So because you actually can touch on a whole lot of these different issues that we're dealing with now in terms of the church. So it's a really cool thing.
And the only really quick question: did you ever attend Brookside up on Eastern, just off of 28th in Grand Rapids?
I never attended it. I had friends who attended it, and Paul DeVries, who is now famous because of last year's synod. Paul DeVries pastors there. Paul DeVries grew up in the church I now serve. The Christian Reformed Church is a very tight little network, as you know. And so Brookside became, so one of the interesting things about Grand Rapids churches are they reflect the migration of Christian Reformed people, both geographically in the community and also in terms of American social stratas. And so, I mean, churches are fascinating elements where you can learn sociology, you can learn economics, you can learn all sorts of things just by watching how people migrate. And a church can become sort of a frame through which to watch these trends go in America. So interesting stuff.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Dale. Sandy, how are you?
No, that's the question of the week.
My.
I'm still sick, so hang on. I'm on 2 devices.
Oh, okay. Do you have a question, Sandy?
Yeah, I'm going to read something, and I got a question, and the question, even regardless of what I'm about to read, the question is related to your thoughts on Peterson and the guy I told you I didn't listen to this morning that you did a talk on.
Destiny?
Yeah, him.
Okay.
And why we're talking about liturgy. Okay.
Right.
All right. So Googling liturgy, the dictionary says it's a form or formulary according to which public religious worship, especially Christian worship, is conducted. Or 2, in ancient Greece, it is a public office or duty performed voluntarily by a rich Athenian. That's not Jeopardy. This is an actual dictionary definition.
Yeah.
And so I just vented quite a bit on Jacob's Discord about my thoughts on Peterson.
I can't imagine there's much venting on Jacob's Discord, is there? Go on. I'm sorry. I shouldn't interrupt.
Never, ever, never. No. It usually ends, when I vent, it usually ends with him going, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh.
So, bearing in mind the definitions I just read you, and the fact I have not listened to your breakdown on Peterson and Destiny. About 30 minutes in, I got quite angry at Peterson's. I did not.
You can get angry at Jordan Peterson. That's okay. I'm just interested to hear why you got angry at Peterson.
The short answer is the stuff I bring up on Jacob's channel where he goes, Sandy, this is not always about your life. And the fact that I had an amazing psychologist at my son's provincial school for the deaf. Had Peterson been there, he and I would have come to words. I mean, seriously.
Okay. Now, Sandy, I know you. You're going to have to focus here because
That's right.
We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in the queue behind you. So, focus your question.
I'm not even going to ask. Other people want to know about Destiny and this conversation too. I saw that in the chat. So, did you have an issue with, and this is my issue, so did you have an issue with Peterson's behavior in this stream? And did you feel that he was leading the question repeatedly or the conversation repeatedly in such a way as to give him simply a platform to vent on his favorite? These are the 5 billion reasons why everybody that I don't like is woke. And this is impossible, so why are they asking it? Because quite frankly, show me impossible, I'll tell you how to do it is one of my key venting phrases that I've used over the years with a lot of stuff going on with this is not all about your life places. And
now you asked a question and then you kept talking. And so it leads me to wonder if there's another question coming or if that's the question you want me to answer. Because what I've done now is just so I can remember, I have starred what Grim Grizz's fear is here.
Oh yeah, no, don't let me go there. I want to know what I asked. Were you completely in favor? Because what I heard on other spots was, so you've destroyed somebody and now you're going to go and destroy Destiny, which means in my mind, you're probably going to go, yay, Peterson. Are you, or are you actually taking apart all of the reasons why I related this to liturgy and a young pastor who is Dutch but was not in the CRC's favorite? So what does this look like on Monday morning?
Oh, okay. Let's
what I want you to talk about.
First on Peterson and Destiny. Did I have a problem with what Peterson did? No. He didn't destroy Destiny, because the problem with that conversation was just like how much other stuff on YouTube where you have the big showdown, whether it's Peterson and Sam Harris or Peterson
One redirect.
and Zizek.
I asked if you were going to try and destroy Destiny. I don't think Peterson did.
Okay, well, let me finish my answer. People going to that was a big deal for both Peterson and Destiny, because Destiny's audience, for the most part, would listen to this and they would probably say, well, see, Destiny didn't just sort of tuck tail and run. He argued his points, and so Destiny won. And some of Peterson's audience would have listened to this and said, oh, Peterson got to make all his points, and so Peterson won. And I didn't think anybody won. I think it was just kind of, we're going to shout our points back and forth. Now, I just made a little video in the membership section, and I see that there are 5 gifted memberships out there. And I made a little video because in the exclusive Daily Wire section was once again the best part of that conversation, where they actually talked back and forth. And what I think this little corner is growing out of, there was a good discussion on Luke's recent live stream where Sam was talking about his appearance on the Council of Trent, where, you know, this little corner is part of a much larger manifestation of exhaustion on YouTube over the Knights and Mooks game, where our Knights wind up just shouting at each other. Now, I'm going to bring this all the way around to liturgy and the definition that you just gave us, because what liturgy is at heart is our attempt to participate in moving the universe towards its telos. That might sound like word salad, but I think you understand what I mean. So when the Greeks did liturgy, and again, it would be the wealthy people. Again, the wealthy people in a society are those who are favored by God because they're wealthy. That sort of direct karmic understanding that the book of Job tries to deconstruct. So I thought that I was hoping that Peterson would start in therapist mode, and that regardless of whether anybody starts changing sides on climate change or immigration or excess deaths or any of the kinds of things that they talked about, that Destiny and Jordan could begin to have more of a relationship, and that their participating audiences could begin to have more productive conversations around these different little things. And then I also had my point about the monarchical vision versus, let's say, the phenomenological or the personal passage. So there's my answer. So do you have a follow-up, Sandy? You got to keep this brief. They're stacking up behind you.
Yeah, I thought part of the problem was that Peterson did start in, sorry, my brain's shutting down, the therapist mode. I thought that Destiny's, well, that's a generalization, kind of responded to that place. So I'd be curious about that at some point, not necessarily
what
now.
Exactly was your problem? I mean, to get narrowed down in and say, okay, so you watched it and you had an emotional reaction and you're trying to make sense of your emotional reaction. And when Jacob says it's not just about you, that's half true, because we're certainly interested in what's going on out in the world. But the only way you're going to know about that, again, and this is more of this personal way of knowing versus sort of a monarchical vision, that then the real interesting questions are, why am I having this emotional reaction to it?
So to answer
and instead of just projecting that onto Peterson and Destiny, then it becomes a question about, who are you and why am I having this reaction?
So to answer your question, sorry, and the brain's not cooperating a bit because fog. My problem with the conversation was that they didn't actually get to a conversation. They gave a topic, and what was it? There was something that I wrote. Okay, wait, back up a bit, because you referenced Jacob. Jacob's main issue with this is Grizz's main issue with this, that Jacob points at how too many research things are story, not actual real science. And that's where they go off track. So, and so I responded in part in my discussions of what I was bringing up there to having heard that about 3 times. And it reminded me of, say within, before they hit, I remember seeing 58 when at one spot when I was looking at some of what they were talking at. And between 30 and 58, I was already flashing to his labeling of Destiny's character as somewhat more feminine than masculine, because he couldn't possibly be, well, anyway, go back and watch it if people are curious. And a particular day in the deaf school where I literally leaned across the table facing down the principal, vice principal, and a series of other, labels of various professionals who were trying to kick my son out of the deaf school because he wasn't using a sign language. And so therefore they said it didn't matter if he was deaf. He wasn't really, because he wasn't using ASL, they're going to put him to. And I said, what you need to understand is I would walk through hell and back for this kid.
Okay. And so
And
here's an interesting point in that when we watch videos, we are sort of mingling with them in a transjective place, in a transjective liminal spot,
which we need to. If it comes back to the practice, what is the 4 Ps? You know, the practical one where you're going to put feet on the ground and hands to a task. That one.
Procedural.
That one.
All right, Sandy. I'm gonna call time here, and
thank you, because I have a memoir to finish writing, and I'll just listen in the background.
I think memoiring is exactly what you should be doing. So thanks, Sandy.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Mr. Christian, how
What's
are
up,
you?
Paul? I'm good.
Good.
My question for you, so try to get right to the point, is: do you feel like your conversation with Brendan Graham Dempsey was that he is past the modern, and that he is actually meta-modern?
I think the whole idea of meta-modern is to try to appreciate what modernity had to offer, appreciate what was right about postmodern critique of modernity, and then move forward in the best way possible. Now, where Brendan and I disagree will be on what of modernity should be kept. And actually again, this morning I watched the exclusive member section on Daily Wire with Bishop Barron. Bishop Barron actually gets right into this because he says, when I was studying in seminary, we were taught in the historical critical, and that is deeply modern. And so Brendan and I started talking about that a little bit, but very quickly we got hung up on the fact that he thought that it was illegitimate for a public person to publicly believe in things like the physical resurrection of Jesus and the virgin birth. And my point was, there's a modern hang-up that actually, when you get into meta-modernity, whatever side you're on with respect to that, those hang-ups and those rules are going to pass, because that's what's happening. And that was my point about saying a whole bunch of people who used to sort of worship Sam Harris are now kissing boxes of relics in Orthodox churches. That's meta-modernity. But it doesn't mean that they're no longer driving cars. And so when you look at, say, the John Vervaeke corner of the corner, that tends to be, because John Vervaeke will also he will also be a little bit more wed to modernity with respect to some of these issues. And then you've got the Jonathan Pajot that are basically saying, we don't give a rip about these issues. But then they're going to have to deal with all of the real world engagement. And so my first conversation here about seminary really was tied up with that, because it's one thing to talk about, orthodoxy and mysticism. Yeah, but if you're actually going to deploy Orthodox churches around America and grow your movement, you're going to have to figure out the leadership challenges. And I mean, scaling is one of the most difficult things when it comes to just about everything, especially with respect to religion.
Well, that's where they could learn from evangelicalism. And I've been having that conversation. I had a long conversation with Lance about liturgy, and there was some interesting pushback on that podcast yesterday and stuff. So, but yeah, I think that Patrick, or what's his name, Brendan, it was hard for me to hear that he wasn't a modernist. Like,
I know, he sounded modernist to me too.
That's what so that was confusing. I mean, I studied the sources in my undergrad, like the J sources. We did Luke Timothy Johnson's take on the Jesus Seminar and all that kind of stuff. So like, I'm familiar with that stuff, but it didn't sound like he was past it. So it was hard for me to know where the connection was. And that's where my conversation.
And so that's why when I got all the way to the end of the conversation and he just starts telling his story.
And you said that's the conversation.
That's where we begin in the metamodern. And this is where Peugeot is right, and Vervaeke's right, and Peterson's right. We begin with the personal in the metamodern, because in the personal, you do have to integrate the modern, but you don't lose those other 3 P's.
So that would be that would be TLC using very fancy technology to do personalist conversation and knowing about God. And
Exactly. So that's where that went. So,
all right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Christian. All right. Marcus, how are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
All right, perfect.
Tell me a little bit about yourself so I can have a little bit of context for your question.
All right. Well, the main thing about my question is it relates to my journey sort of through this corner and more broadly through the what did you call that path? The atheist to Peterson to
Peugeot pipeline.
Yeah, that.
Lots of P's in that one too.
Yeah. And that's not even getting into the 5 P's of knowledge and all the other P's that are floating around this place. But because I started off sort of nominally Christian in the broadly moved from Baptist kind of to non-denominational as a child, didn't really understand much of anything, went to Sunday school, learned the stories, and that was about it. And then, like all smart 12-year-olds who are way too smart for their own good, I decided that I was too intelligent to believe in all this religious stuff and moved on. A few years ago, I started listening to Peterson, mostly, funnily enough, because of his political stuff, put him on my radar. And I was like, okay, that's interesting, because I'm invested in politics, to my own, dismay. Yeah, politics has a way of punching me in the throat, whether I like it or not. But yeah, so I started listening to him for that. And I was like, okay, so he's got some interesting takes. And then it moved on to his self-help stuff and his advice and all this stuff and clean your room and all those memes. I was like, okay, this guy's interesting. And then I found his Genesis series. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And then like a whole bunch of people, like that part of my story is not really all that unique. I moved through the whole thing of going through it and being like, okay, well, it's symbolically meaningful, but yeah, it's not true. And then at some point I had to go, okay, it's true, because it wasn't just Peterson, and then it was Peugeot, and then it was other people like I'm forgetting who's the guy who wrote Cold Case Christianity.
I don't remember, but
yeah, I don't remember either. I'm sorry if you know, but yeah. So books like that, talks like that, channels like Capturing Christianity, channels like
the whole apologetics thing,
the whole thing. So I kind of fell into that, and then over time it became like, okay, so this is true. Now what do I do with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of still where I am, because I'm in the hallway. I'm definitely firmly in the hallway. I can't decide which is my room. If that makes
Start checking rooms out.
I have, and that's the thing, is because I'm leaning into it a bunch of different places, but I do want to know, like, in your opinion, how important is overall church unity to like the process of kind of what we're doing? And I realize asking a Protestant about church unity probably isn't the best idea, but like that's something that
it's been united since I've been in it. At least the Christian Reformed Church, no, that hasn't even worked out for us either.
Exactly. And I'm starting to wonder, like, because I do think it's important that the church, what would you say, the little C church across the world, all the whole body of believers in every stripe and fashion, I do think it's important that we be united, but it's like, how does that play out? And how do you even deal with that? I like the Anglican Church in their model of like, well, here are the core stuff that we believe, and here's all the other stuff that you can debate about because we don't really have enough firm official.
Every church does that.
Yeah, every church.
That's how you have to deal with unity.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say what's essential and what's indifferent.
Okay. because it's just, and it's so interesting to see this, and I see this a lot in smaller churches, because you'll have these little tiny disagreements that sprout into, well, we're splitting off a new denomination, or we're going to become non-denominational, and we're gonna, like, everything's going to be separate, and everybody's all atomized in their own little things. And I think part of that's just because I live in America, and America is a very individualist place. So part of that I think comes from the culture, but part of that also I don't know. Like, I don't know, and I don't know how detrimental that is, because there are positives to it. But I also
if you
wonder,
take this and put it into a question, what would it be?
Okay. I would say I kind of wanted to get your perspective on specifically, from what you know of Anglicanism, how they deal with the aspect of church unity and trying to, like, bridge the gap between Protestants and Catholic, and also Orthodox, and what your personal take is on how important church unity is to the whole project of bringing God's message to the world.
Anglicans, well, it's right there in their name. They're Anglophiles.
Yeah.
Anglican church basically means English language church. So there's Anglo-Catholics, there's liberal Anglicans, there's charismatic Anglicans, there's evangelical Anglicans. The Anglicans have sort of managed to keep a degree of institutional unity amidst a lot of diversity that usually cracks open churches. Now, they've not been as successful at this as the Roman Catholics, obviously, because they, and then you have the ACNA, the Anglican churches of North America. There's a Nigerian ACNA that rents out a room from us here at Living Stones. So the Anglicans, I think, and the Anglicans are also a pretty good group because they're fairly self-aware. Recently, someone pointed a book to me. I never finished it, but I read, a CRC minister, a friend of mine, pointed a book to me, and it was writing exactly about Anglican unity and how Anglicans think about unity. Boy, I don't know. It's been a while, and I'll see if I can pull it up. But I think if you're asking questions about unity, there are worse places to start than the Anglican Church, because the Anglican Church has sort of managed to not necessarily achieve the kind of unity that, let's say, the Roman Catholics have, but at the same time have managed to try to keep it in tension. Let me see if I can. Anglicanism by Gerard Bray. I only downloaded the sample. I'll see if I can. See if I can. Oh, let's see. Present. Share screen. Window. Tab. Share. There's the book. Anglicanism, a Reformed Catholic Tradition. And I read the beginning of that book, and it was really good. I haven't sprung for the rest of the book, but it very much barks up the same tree that you're looking for. So
okay, and then how important do you think that is, even in the grand scheme of the church's mission in the world?
Well, it was important enough for Jesus to pray for it in the Gospel of John. It's kind of hard to say it's unimportant if Jesus himself is asking that all of his children, as it were, would be one. Now, how exactly is that? Because if you look at, let's say, evangelicalism in America, that's a striving for a particular kind of unity, but it's sort of the opposite pole from, let's say, Roman Catholic unity. And from what I've seen, the Orthodox are struggling with this unity thing too, because I think once people get beyond Well, the first thing you have to realize is, and somebody said this recently to me, I don't remember where, it might have been on a live stream. It's a very dangerous thing to try to be a Christian all by yourself. It's not just unworkable, it's dangerous. You have to move towards a church of some kind. And that's clear. Okay. That then scales up to the next thing. It's dangerous for a local church to not be part of a larger, broader body. And it's very dangerous. And that's why churches do sort of the same thing. And this movement, of course, just keeps heading up until it fills the universe. So it's very important, but details matter. And many evangelicals sort of pick a certain kind of unity. Roman Catholics work a certain kind of unity. Orthodox are working certain kinds of unity. So this has also been a deep work of the church right from the start. And, what's, again, a fairly close reading of the New Testament suggests, a fierce debate between Judaizers, as Paul calls them, and was James the Just, the book of James, were they the Judaizers? And did everyone then get a spot in the New Testament? So all of those tensions are right there in our canon? I think probably. So yeah, it's important. But then figuring out how to pursue it, it's a work of a lifetime.
Yeah, that always seems to be the hard part, I suppose. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Marcus, thanks for jumping on.
Yes, thank you.
Christian, unmute. There you
Hey,
are.
how's it going?
Christian?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
You're good.
What's your question? What's on your mind? See,
Yeah,
I'm not doing any randos type stuff with faces that should be known to the corner. So Christian is well known, even though people can't say the name of his channel. So just say the name of your channel right now so Grim Grizz can get it.
Agapologia.
Agapologia.
Yeah.
Agapologia. There we go. All right, Christian, what's your question?
Yeah. So I watched the Destiny Jordan Peterson conversation. I watched your reaction to it, and then I saw Sandy's response to it as well. And I thought, oh no, she's going to have the same question as me, but it ended up being totally different. So it was good because you mentioned liturgy. So my question is, well, it seemed like your kind of issue or your desire with it was that it would have had a different kind of liturgy about it, like that Jordan, or maybe even Jordan Peterson would have a different sort of liturgy in general with his conversations, right? But I wonder, right?
Well, some of his conversations are really good.
Yeah,
and that's fair. It's like my sermons. There are sermons that are turds, and there are sermons that sing.
Right.
Same with conversations. So
right. So what I wondered was, because I saw that the video was uploaded, his video, the Jordan Peterson Destiny video, and I thought, there's no way I'm watching that. Like, I won't be able to handle it because I'm like non-confrontational, I'm agreeable, I'm like, this is gonna be a disaster, right? And then I'm like, but I have to watch this. So I start watching it, and then I stop. Then I keep watching. Then I'm like, all right, I'm going to look at the comments, and that will tell me whether I should keep watching. I'm going to get to the question very, very soon. So I was surprised by the comment section. I was like, okay, like, because it was respectful towards Destiny. So I was like, oh, okay. So I continue watching through all of the uncomfortable parts, and I'm surprised by how well Destiny handles the uncomfortable parts, right? And I'm pleased with how Jordan Peterson responds to Destiny's responses, right? So I'm like, okay, this is great. So I came away from it thinking, overall, this was possibly one of Jordan Peterson's most important conversations to date, not because of anything particular that was spoken, but because of how it unfolded, right?
Yeah.
Because each of them has a sort of liturgy, even though they have exceptions which are more palatable to me, but to their general audiences, I would assume most of their conversations that are like heated and stuff like that are conversations. Most of their debate things are what the people want to see. So to see a very a conversation characterized by a lot of conflict actually unfold, I would say successfully, overall, right? I would say it unfolded.
Nobody walked out.
Nobody, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking of what's his name for
Peter Hitchens.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so my question. While I agree with you about my personal preference would be for his liturgy in this particular conversation to have been different, I think it was actually exactly what it needed to be, because it's like animals testing each other brutally at first, right? And then coming away with greater respect for one another. Now my desire is, I want to see that conversation that you're talking about, right? Now that they've tested the waters, they've tested each other, right? Like almost like dogs, right? But but they've come away respecting each other.
Yeah.
Given that, like, that's my perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think that, well, what do you think should be the liturgy of a Jordan Peterson conversation with someone like Destiny, or I say, God forbid, semi-jokingly, Vaush in the future or something like that, right?
Oh, so number one, I was super glad he did it.
Yeah.
Because it's been a long time since Jordan has sort of been sharing a platform with critics, and that he shared it with a streamer critic. And I take Jordan Peterson at his word when he says he has invited many people on the left to come on his show and they won't. I completely believe that. And so it is to Destiny's credit that he went. Now there's of course a status differential, and so it was also in Destiny's best interest. I mean, it's the same reason why Gavin Ortland hasn't taken up Sam Tiedemann's challenge, or some of the same reasons. And it's some of the same reasons why I'm not expecting an email from Bishop Barron, because I didn't necessarily say the most approving things about him in my recent video. But there's going to be in other videos when I say very approving things about Bishop Barron, because actually in a normal relationship, you say some things that are really flattering, and you say some things that are critical. And that's why when I turned on my video and I saw, because I knew when I was inviting someone into the Virtually Not Alone network, Grim Grizz, in terms of the status hierarchy of the virtue. Now, every time I mention Grim Grizz, I'm going to have to put this thing out. In the Virtually Not Alone network, Grim Grizz has higher status than I have, because it's his baby, and I'm just coming in. So there's a sign of health when you can actually give positive and negative, and it's okay. That's how real relationships work, and that's how they're supposed to work. So yes, it was a sign of health that Destiny was on there. Now, Peterson, the difficulty that Jordan has is he has reached some amazing heights in the past, like with the Kathy Newman interview. You could argue about the Helen Lewis interview, because it's not necessarily bad to have a contentious interview. But, and so I think your point is right. So, and it was, I think, ironic, the fact that I had just had that rather contentious conversation with Brandon Dempsey. But he early on in the conversation said, I just want to be really careful. And that's what you do early on. It's like, let's keep checking with each other to make sure that this is play. Because I want to have my sister on for a randos conversation, and that could turn out into an all-out brawl. But I know it's okay.
Right.
Because my sister and I, we can really go at it.
Right.
And she's going to tell me about the home you grew up in, blah, 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 blah. That never happened. What do you mean that didn't happen? And then off we go. I mean, that could happen.
Yeah.
But so I think everything that you said, I agree with. And I would have liked to have seen, and again, this is the point of my video, was not just sort of a low resolution, don't like the talk. In fact, again, the membership section of the talk, I've only listened to half of it, but that sounded much more like the kind of talk I was looking for. But that, of course, was 2 hours into the conversation. And in many cases, you have to sort of achieve that. And part of the reason I do what I do, and part of the reason like Elizabeth Oldfield does what they do, if you begin with the personal instead of the monarchical, because if you're beginning with the monarchical, all you do is fight over, who has the right facts. But if you begin with the personal, well, let's start talking about your life. And so if Brandon Dempsey talks about the fact that he grew up in a more of a fundamentalist household, and then he went and, sort of a Bart Ehrman story, then he went to seminary, and a lot of these ideas were challenged, and he basically accepted the framework that he got in a modernist theological education. Well, okay, so let's approach it this way, and then I can share, because I also have a modernist theological education. So I think, and I want to resist sort of the low resolution YouTube approach, which says good or bad.
Right.
Come on, people. There's some good, and like or don't like's a little bit better, but there's a lot I like. Almost every conversation or video that I see, there's some things I like, there's some things I don't like. But now when I have to talk, I have to bring that in and put a point to it. So then people might say, Paul didn't like the talk with Destiny. Well, why? And that's where, just like I did with Sandy, you turn it around and say, okay, well, what in you, Paul? What's your agenda with this? My agenda is to see the evolution of this space. And, well, what are you doing to change that? Well, look at the TLC and my participation and involvement in it. This is my attempt to change YouTube. And you might say, how can a channel of 29,000 subs change YouTube? Probably very slowly. So that's where I'm at. So
yeah.
How's that, Christian? Any last minute rebuttals? Otherwise, I gotta,
Oh, just really quick. If you also go check out the comments on Destiny's upload of the video, because he did a 35-minute upload.
Oh.
On his channel, and the comments on there are actually respectful of Jordan Peterson as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'd also be curious to see what 35 minutes he chose.
Yeah, it's pretty hot.
And that's just it, because of course the hot stuff gets the clicks by virtue of our, we look for action because it's dangerous. Yeah. And so we got the screen between us, so it feels safer.
It was a good model of not every time you have a heated conversation with somebody, you're going to be able to do tell me about the house you grew up in, right? Like if you get into a heated discussion, even at a family get together, right? It could blow up quickly. And I think the dynamic between Jordan Peterson and Destiny was actually a good model for how to handle that kind of situation.
Yeah. So,
but thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Christian. Hey, Chris, how are you? Oh, I don't hear you. I still don't hear you. Oh, no. All this time waiting, and it isn't working.
How about now?
Oh, I hear you now. I almost had to reach and play some branding. Yeah, I see you down there smiling, Grizz. You little colonizer, you. Right. I know what you're about there, Mr. Grizz. But I'm in charge right now. There you go, Chris.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm jazzed to be on the show, as the guy said on Galaxy Quest.
I've seen your comments for a while, so.
My question is, do you have some hope in the future generations? Old guys, it's like, oh, those kids, but it reminds me of the book of Jonah and his outrage that God wasn't going to judge these people.
Yeah.
You know, like they should be. They should be judged, and he's not doing his job. We're in a time where, like the social justice thing, you know, does that give you some hope that they're at least they have a vision of justice and how things should be? To me, it gives me some hope, but also I'm kind of discouraged by the people who should be believing that it's going to be taken care of, but they don't act like it's going to be taken care of.
Amen.
So what's your point on that?
Amen. No, I think Christians, of all the religions that I know, and what do I know? But I think Christians, more than anyone else, should be optimistic about the future. By virtue of, that doesn't mean I'm a post-millennialist. It means that Christians know how the story ends, that it ends in a good way. And there are catastrophes along the way. But no, I look at the younger generation, and I see tons of things that they know and embody. They'll have their challenges just like we have ours. But I do not despair. I do not despair. So that's my answer.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Oh, look at this. Someone we've not heard a lot from. Shane, how are you?
This is Jesus' secret weapon.
Oh, my.
No. I was actually, I became a catechumen since we last talked.
Oh, wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was thinking, because when you were talking to all those other people, I was like, instead of like talking to you, I just send you like this little postcard of notes. It's just a million like scribbly deals. But so I think like one of the main things I was trying to.
Well, what's your question? Because this show is about questions.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my question is, in looking for like a sense of wholeness in the church, because first question. Okay. So does the totality of the story actually happen wherein there's an actual guy who is the Antichrist who is absolutely done? He's done. Or is that a recurring story? And this is something I've been trying to like, because in my sense, when I would go to like these Bible churches and stuff, the way Revelation played out would play out in an actual literal, like in a physical way that mapped onto Revelation 1:1.
Yeah.
So,
I think so. There's the preterist that says it happened. There's the perennialist that says it always happens, and there's the futurist that says it's going to happen.
Right. And they're all right in Christ. Like those I don't think that those came about in like absolute falsehood, right?
Yeah.
Those things, if you make a sect out of any of those things, it's wrong. But none of those things are wrong in Christ, right?
Yes. I think that's a good way to say it. I think it's a good way to say it. Nicely done, Shane.
Yeah.
You got another question, or shall we? Because I gotta keep moving. I got some celebrities behind you now. We'll see how long Grim and Chad wait. They're used to getting access right away. So go ahead.
All right. So I guess the other thing would be, and then there's teachings outside of the church. So Jung had a quaternity where he thought that wholeness had to do with, so there's the Trinity, which my patron saint defended, but then there's also this weird, the quaternity, which puts Satan somewhere in the story, and he's not necessarily a bad guy. Like he's all the things that, playing the devil's advocate is something we do for the sake of like wholeness and a sense of like, we play the devil's advocate because we don't want anybody to be that or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
I don't know anything about Jung really. So when people ask me Jung questions, I really can't answer because I've read some of Jung. I started with his biography because, of course, my personal approach to things. But some of his other work, it's really tough sledding. So
my spiritual father has all the guys I talk about that aren't saints, he's like, stop reading them.
Yeah.
I
there's
love you,
plenty of
Father.
church fathers. Great to see you, Shane.
Yes.
All right. And there he is. I was
Oh.
worried you might not be here. So good. How are you?
No, I'm here. I just I'm at work and I've been running around.
Okay.
I was in the car before.
Well, your
So-
time has come. What's your question?
So tiny bit of context, but my best friend and I both he was as you could say, a believer, raised in church throughout his whole life. Myself, not until after college, but he would say that he kind of had a resurgence in his faith around the same time that I came to belief. It's when we became best friends, playing tennis together at the University of Mississippi. Go Rebs. And the kind of first, I came through the sort of Jordan Peterson, this little corner, started listening to you quite early, Paul Anleitner, kind of that stream of a lot of content online.
Yep.
But then more in the practical side, kind of within my life, came through some friends, himself and my best friend included, and sort of the first resources, I guess you could say, or stream of the church that I was sort of directed to was through people like John Mark Comer. That conversation you commented on a few weeks ago, and threw him pretty quickly into the sort of Dallas Willard, Richard Foster kind of spiritual formation. And so I've sort of had on one hand physically going to evangelical mega churches in Texas where I live. I'm a coach at Baylor in Waco, so sort of a mecca of the sort of Southern Baptist megachurch movement. And in Dallas, that's where I've been going to church, met my wife, amazing experience, a lot of amazing people. On the other hand, very much a lurker in this little corner and listening kind of, nonstop for probably 4 years now. And then maybe a third thing would be reading a lot of the more Dallas Willard, Richard Foster tradition. And so I guess my question would be, and this has been a topic of discussion between my best friend and I lately, is, where or some thoughts from you on the sort of gap, I guess, what he and I have been talking about, have identified of older men, specifically men within the church, and sort of relationships between older men who are not pastors or priests necessarily and younger men, not necessarily their sons, within the church that are, from the Comer and Newhoff conversation, sort of that discussion of stages 4, 5, and 6. And the necessity for these close long-term relationships. And so I'm sort of poking around the question, but do you see that as a pretty big gap? And what do you see as, maybe, I don't know, potential solution is sort of a big thing to ask for, but, that's kind of all the inputs there. And we've just been talking a lot about that because we both felt that as a felt need in our life and a lack as well, and not necessarily wanting to cross over into the therapeutic, like I hear your critiques of John Mark and that strain and the tendency towards the therapeutic. And so, just curious if you have any thoughts on that quickly.
I do. That is a great question. So part of what happened in the counterculture and the rise of the Jesus movement I think in a lot of ways, the breakdown of the American church began in the Jesus movement and the counterculture. And what you began having was churches that were segmented by generations, demographic generations. And so obviously the Jesus movement tended to be younger people. Now they're boomers now, but they were younger people coming in. And after that, you had waves of church planting. So the Jesus people seeds the seeker movement, and Pasadena, the church growth movement, which had an ideology of birds of a feather flock together. And so you had the Jesus movement, you had the born again movement, the rise of the evangelicals, you had the seeker movement, And that all sort of starts to come undone with the boomers. And behind the boomers, you have the X's with the emergent movement, which sort of splits between kind of a mainline revival. Nadia Bolz-Weber would sort of be a headliner for that. And then a Young, Restless, and Reformed, which would be like Mark Driscoll and the Young, Restless, and Reformed. And then you have the John
and all the
Mark
churches where I'm
Comer
at. Yeah.
that are sort of in between, because, you know, people don't think about Rob Bell, Mark Driscoll, Nadia Bolz-Weber. They're all in the same generational cohort. And John Mark Comer, they're all in the same generational cohort. And so then you get this wave again of every time we planted churches in Sacramento, it was always young people, young families. And the older churches were over here. And so then very quickly, some of the people were looking around and saying, we have all this wisdom dying in older churches. Younger women were looking for older women to mentor them. Younger men were looking for older men to mentor them. And actually, when we got the Jordan Peterson, then estuary movement going, one of the things that we got from a lot of the young guys who started coming to it were, I'm here because I want to find older men to listen to that are not clergy. And I think I've never heard this point made before, but I think actually one of the key elements that have made the Young, Restless, and Reformed movement go, especially in a church like the PCA or in the Acts 29 networks, was that Presbyterian form of government had lifelong eldership only for men. And so what that produced in a lot of PCA churches were older men who were mature in the faith, then discipling younger men. And they had to be men because it was the PCA. So I think one of the reasons that Acts 29 and the PCA and the Young, Restless, and Reformed movement flourished, and has flourished in the way that it has, it's got plenty of its own problems too, but is exactly this point. And now it's going to be interesting to see if this is a strength of complementarian churches. What I mean by that is churches that won't allow women leadership. Because what then it tends to happen is that because women are sort of barred this entrance into the institution, they sort of set up the dual tracks. And so, and this is what I saw in churches and other cultures, in Korean churches, in Hispanic churches, where generally speaking, they wouldn't go complementarian, is that you'd more often have older men mentoring younger men and older women mentoring younger women. Now, how this is going to play out in American Orthodoxy will be interesting to watch. But that is, I think, an element of conservatism and what's going to be happening there. So does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think that provides a ton of context, and it rings true in the sense of a lot of the churches I've been around, both as a member and then just friends. I was in Dallas for years, and so you have a mix of the Matt Chandlers as well as a bunch of other Acts 29 churches with more Baptist churches. And they have these slight differences, but there's a lot of similarities, especially theologically, really, because you know, the pastors, if they sit down, they could hash out the differences they have, but the bodies of the church are largely, especially young people, are largely formed through relationships like what you're talking about. And because of the thirst for those relationships with older men, and I'm not saying this is a negative, I might disagree with some things, but the theology tends to be shaped in the same way, right? Like through the Young, Restless, and Reformed. And it's often, you know, if you dig a little bit past the surface of why do you believe, or why are you in this particular tradition, or have you thought about these things, you pretty quickly realize it's like, oh, well, this was, you know, my dad and my dad's friends, and the only men that I knew who were ever going to invest in me, you know? And so these men invested in me, and that's why I am, you know, I believe in Jesus and I have this life, and maybe that's how I met my wife and all these kinds of things at these churches. And so, you know, it's a communal thing, like you talk about all the time. It just, for my friend and I, it puts you in a little bit of a strange situation if you are, you know, fully committed to the church, but not necessarily fully committed to all of the axioms and the propositions and that can get a little bit in the way of that more sort of discipleship relationship that you're talking about past the first couple stages. So anyways,
great question.
I appreciate it.
Great question. Thanks for jumping on. Good to see
Thanks,
you.
Paul. Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Are we going to get to talk about Dune?
You know, that wasn't what I was planning to talk about.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't have to talk about Dune. Sometime maybe you and I should have a conversation about Dune, because I just finished the first book, and I started the second, and I had thoughts. And and I love that you're engaging with Damien. I'm going to talk with Damien coming up in a little while. But it's the corner's working, baby. Keep doing what you're doing. But what was your question now, Michael?
Well, my question is more related to symbolism, and I had listened to the audiobook that Josh Butler put out, and I know you would at one point you said you were going to have a conversation with him. Is that
I have to circle back, because that was that was like before my trip to Europe and everything, and so then I couldn't make that work. So I have to get back to him and do another conversation with him. But I do want to do a little bit more reading of his before we talk. So
yeah, I mean, the book was great, I thought, and I think it's
he did put out an audiobook, you said?
Beautiful Union. It's the one about sex.
Oh, it's the one he got into all that trouble for.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But so here's my thought. So, because he's evangelical, and so we're having more evangelical maybe people. A guy at my church actually came up to me the other day and said, "Hey, what do you know about Jonathan Pageau?" Because Jonathan is speaking at like a conference for the his kids go to like a classical charter school, and Jonathan Pageau is going to be a speaker at their conference or something. So so it's like this stuff is cropping up or whatever. But I've noticed, and what that book is kind of talking about, like in our culture, like there's a couple symbols that paganism loves. Like let's see, like if you can see, I don't know if you see it somewhere back there.
I love it. We have a question with a visual aid.
Yeah, well, I'm at a job site, and there's those like there's these portable toilets here, and if you go into those, there's a handful of symbols that will be displayed by bored people in there, and they're the same ones you find in Pompeii and all over ancient Greece and all this.
They're archetypal.
Yeah. But when we're getting a lot of our kind of newfound knowledge of symbolism through these Christian traditions, where they've had monastic orders and celibate priesthoods, these are people that spent all their time contemplating every symbol except for those ones. But on the other hand, like you have like people like Malcolm and Simone, and they're just putting that like that's a central topic in their their conversations or whatever. Just a frank discussion about sex and all these things. And I mean, I think are we missing out by not taking advantage of that powerful symbolism?
Oh boy. Attention is important, and whatever is true, whatever is just. I mean, think about what the Apostle Paul says in the book of Philippians. Focus on these things. So I would say let's find symbols that edify rather than so I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, because I think there's certainly because in my hopeful take in opposition to Malcolm and Simone is I think that like the Jesus people kind of thing, the Jesus revolution, there's going to be at some point an influx of urban monoculture people to our churches, and they're not gonna have the we don't talk about these things that way, like filters built in. So I don't know. I mean, how do we how do we prepare for that? Like his book is great because he diffuses a lot of the awkward.
I liked his first book a lot, and so I haven't read his next book. I'll have to look at it before I talk to him. But I think the reaction there was just recently an article in the New York Times by Ruth Graham looking at like the conservative calendar with like hot conservative chicks with like guns and bikinis and stuff, and she's like, what's this about? So I think your question is a good one, because stuff comes round, and it's good. It's good, Peterson's quoting of Jung that sometimes you have to look in low places. So that's a great question, Michael. All right, Michael. Well, you keep doing what you're doing, man, and keep talking the Dune stuff. I'm enjoying it. I could think it's interesting stuff. So
leave comments, Paul. If you're watching my stuff, I want a comment. So just to know you're there,
All right, I'll leave a comment. Say it'll be like my bathroom graffiti. Should I figure out how to make emojis and put bathroom symbols in your comment section?
Yeah, sure. I'll share them on Twitter.
All right, Michael. Thanks a lot. All right.
Hey.
Corner Citizen. Here he is.
Hey, Pastor Paul.
You don't use your real name anymore? You've gotten that big that,
no, I mean, honestly, this is just a dodge. A side note, I have no idea where that came from. Are you putting that on?
I had to represent. I mean, I know I get in trouble now and then because I represent and I don't do it in the right way. And then I get called on the carpet, and pretty soon what's going to come is some sort of VNA disciplining, and maybe Grizzle, I'll get a cease and desist letter from who would send me from Lance saying he is now representing Grim Grizz, and I have to stop using Broken Clock Tower Discord branding and symbols because I haven't paid the licensing fee. He's gonna do the licensing grift. That's coming next. Wait,
everyone's about to make money, Everyone's we're all gonna be.
I don't know if it was on the Freddie and Paul show, but Ryan is sometimes on. Ryan is the guy who goes to the African Anglican Church, and they baptized him recently, but he always comes out in the middle of the service to eat our snacks after our church service and to be on the Freddie and Paul show. And last week he's like, we're not getting paid for this. I'm just waiting for Freddie to find the Grim Grizz show. I'm just waiting for Freddie to. And actually, maybe I'll send Freddie Grim Grizz's phone number. That could be interesting, because once Freddie has your phone number, you hear about it. You hear from about 4 or 5 times a day. So, Chad, you want me to give him your number, Chad? Chad's not sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alan. What's your question?
I'm still going by Alan. I just didn't want to channel with my name, whatever.
I totally understand.
For the chat, I want to point out that Paul's doing the magic trick right now. Like he's doing, I like pointing out that it's about asking questions, but then he ends up getting you to talk more than you want to talk. So this is how the magic trick gets done. So I'd like to point out, this is the spirit of the age, spirit of the corner, in my opinion. And I'm really bad at it because I like talking, but Paul's really good at it. So the question I had is you've talked a decent amount about a YouTuber a relationship YouTuber, initials go by HM. I'd prefer not to use his.
Yeah.
And one thing that I keep thinking about every time I see his content is no one's talking about, he's talking about the agent and no one's talking about the arena. Is all he talks about is how to win the game.
Wow.
And no one talks about the game we're playing. And it's like, the reason he's popular is because he explains how to win the game. But we don't have to play the same game. You can make a new game. Or and the game's always changing anyway. So it's always going to be different. And you're always but it's like, as someone who goes to like a conservative church, yeah, girls think it's cool when you know how to, when you can quote the Bible and quote scripture. And that's not like, they're not pretending that, like, they actually do that because you're winning in the arena of, you know, this particular arena. But if you go up to a girl on the street and you're like, hey, like, ever heard of John 3:16? Like, I mean, that wouldn't impress a girl
Hey,
in church,
Christian girls in the church arena that are really into it find male Christian competency hot.
Yeah.
That, I mean, anybody who, I've had pictures of me and my wife, especially when we were young, anybody that saw the two of us together would say, wow, Paul sure married up. Well, you know, again, in that church arena, Christian competency is hot. And so I'm actually, he and I are going to have a conversation coming up. It's on the calendar. So, which could be interesting, because I don't know if he's going to show his face. I have no idea how that conversation is going to go, but I'm going to approach it. It's more difficult with people that they don't use their real name and they never show their face. And so then, I mean, by virtue of what we are doing in this little corner is both sort of the epitome of what YouTube could be and anti-YouTube, because it's anyway. So no, you're exactly right. And I've watched a lot of his content, and I often come away thinking, yeah, he's a sharp guy. He's making good points, but there's way more to this story that doesn't get committed in his little 3 or 5 minute videos. So hopefully we'll get at that. And I know he's into integral theory, because that comes through in his videos. So I don't know. Did you have a question in there?
Oh yeah. Just how can we talk about the arena? How can we talk about, because I mean, he always uses the, like, women now are like X, and I get that you have a 3-minute video, you gotta bet it up, but it's like, maybe there's a spirit of the age that is broad, but like you're obsessed with like this like, oh, well, the arena's just kind of always there and it's always the same. So women are like this these days. They used to be like that, but this is how you win the game. And I'm like, no, there are a million different arenas that you could win that game inside of. And maybe there's some threads that pervade all of them. Like I think it's Sam is talking in the chat, is talking about competency. But competency in what? Competency how? And that's just one. I mean, like, and what you define is being attractive competency. Maybe you worked to become competent and looking good, but maybe you were just born beautiful. It's like, are you competent? And like competent, you know, it's something like competency. Yeah, it's across all domains, but because it's across all domains, it's so broad as to almost be meaningless.
Well, competency as a term, but each arena has its own competencies.
Yeah.
And so, and like beauty is a really tricky one, because it does cut across, but it's a transcendental.
Yeah.
So is goodness, the good guy.
Yeah.
And so the truthful guy. You want to see a woman angry? Lie to her. Oh, I mean, there's a transcendental. You lie to a woman or lie to a man. So those are the transcendentals. But maybe what we need to do, we need to have some more, we need to have some more group conversations. If you want to put together a group that wants to talk about this, because I've done it with Rod and Catherine and Eamon, and, you know, I hope to do more with them. But if you want to put together another group to talk about this, I think it's good, you know, and if you can't wait for me, put together another group. We got enough channels. Chad will put it on his channel. Chad will put almost anything on his channel, right, Chad? He says yes. So, yeah, but I think this is a perennial topic here, because, well, we got a lot of young men and a fair number of them are single, and they'd like to not be single. And we don't have what we should do is find the female TLC out there. And I don't know, is there another flotilla of eligible young women that would be compatible with our TLC dudes?
We've crash landed in this planet of only. We've crash landed on the planet of only women who need to reproduce their species. You know, I don't know if we'll find that. You know, the Amazonians have captured us, and but yeah, I mean, absolutely. I guess maybe this isn't a question, and maybe I'm coming on to more make a point, but in my mind, the arena is doing the heavy lifting that so often someone like HM puts on the individual. And he's saying, become so big and important and good that the woman, she derives all sense of self. She can't help. You're the 1% dude. 100 women are going after one guy. Become so big and strong and powerful that you can provide everything. You can provide shelter, food. You're beautiful. And I know this isn't that much of a question, but it's just like, I keep screaming at my phone. That's what the community does. That's what the community, you can't, every guy can't be the 1%, but A, definitionally.
Yeah.
And B, it's just like that, like, it's great if you can be that, but like, I don't even think you'd want to if you could.
Yeah.
She's every, I mean, imagine saying to your wife, like, you're going to be my therapist, you're going to be the maid, you're going to be like, it's just like, why don't we talk about communities that are healthy enough to provide some structure and also support that like not every man is going to be the like ultra Nietzschean Ubermensch. And it's just like, I get it because it works in some sense. Like if you become the Ubermensch, like good things probably will happen.
Yeah.
But like not everyone. So I don't know. That wasn't much of a question, but it just, I don't know. I'm just screaming at my phone. Like this is a way to get people interested in church, in community. It's not just like, oh, you'll feel good and it'll be so nice. It's like, no, it'll actually, the things you want are better served.
Church can be a great place to meet women.
Yeah.
That was my strategy, but
Yeah,
I was
so,
already in
yeah,
Christian school. So, all right. Great to
All
see
right,
you,
thank
Alan.
you.
Here
Good
he
to see you.
comes. We're saving some of the best for last here. I see the assassins. I just read something this morning, Grizz, and I was thinking of making a video about it where this dude, he was like an Ubermensch and assassins were coming for him. And so he knew that he was a great guy with a bow. So he shot the assassin with a bow, but the assassin was able to sort of stagger up there and stick him with a knife. And I thought, oh, this could be a good assassin story. That's anyway.
They get
Grizz.
close sometimes. Just because they fail doesn't mean they don't get close.
Well, I'm glad to see that they have failed up until this point. It's good to see you, Grizz.
It's always good when I do. I'm gonna try and bring a saint with me. Let's see real quick. That one I have to get Stephen to translate, but that's the one I'm bringing. I have great news for you. News for you. You're hosting a Q&A. This is what this was supposed to be, and I only have one question for every time in this stream you've said Grim Grizz. Just that's how many questions I have for you. You ready?
Yes.
I think a lot of these people needed to be demonstrated how to ask you a question on a Q&A.
That is always the way it is.
So I thought I would do that. The first question is, who is Vaush?
He's a streamer who that thing came about. The guy who was trying to make a channel on modern debate, he contacted me, and he contacted this Vaush guy, and I guess he's kind of a left-wing streamer on left-wing Twitch and YouTube, and said, I want you two to debate about Jordan Peterson. I said, okay. And that's what happened.
Who is Destiny?
The only thing I know about Destiny is that there's this one Rationality Rules video where Rationality Rules is trying to figure out about Papa Peterson, and he says, oh, Destiny gets him right. So that's all I really know about Destiny. Who is Grim Grizz?
And yet, you're devoting significant portions of your channel and the stream talking about these people.
Oh, so define significant portions.
It's the last day and a half.
Well, yeah. Is that significant portions? I've been doing this for 7 years.
What's the connection between Vaush and Destiny?
They're both streamers. They're both left-wing streamers.
And why did you decide to unprivatize your Vaush interview so close to the Destiny Peterson release?
Because I thought that was a good example of having a conversation with a left-wing streamer that actually went pretty well.
Man. Have you seen the new Beetlejuice trailer?
No.
It's coming back out this fall. I'm terribly excited.
I'm going to bring Chad in because we're all just friends here. You can keep asking questions, Grizz.
If they come back to me, I certainly shall. Those men have more sullied reputations than Andrew Tate.
Really?
And so for Peterson or you to voice them is significant.
Really?
Because of their character.
So is this like analogous to Trent Horn's following complaining about them platforming Sam?
I don't think the reasons that we think that these men are bad men are the reasons anyone would think Sam is a bad
Well,
man.
why are they bad men? I don't know anything about them.
The allegations I've been familiarized with are like cohabitating as man and wife with 14-year-olds and such.
Really?
That's the nature I've been told of the character of these men. I didn't do my due diligence on the subject, but I took the source at their word, and because they're usually reliable on such matters, and that's the area of concern.
Wow.
We have about Peterson.
I would have thought they'd be in prison for that.
Yeah, or perhaps under the thumb of an agency that could send them to prison at a moment's notice, and therefore they do what that agency says. But anyway, the stream was glowing so hard and my name was dropped so often I felt as though I needed the Beetlejuice.
Well, I think Jordan Peterson needs a Grim Grizz to keep him up to date on these things, because I would never know this if I didn't have you, Grizz. So, you know.
It's a lot of other flotillas on the internet obsess around these sorts of character defects and people getting away with it and famous and rich for it. And so I hear things in the saltier parts of the internet waters.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry I dropped your name so much, Grizz.
It's okay. It's done great. It's done great for me for so far, but now that you're going into the dating sphere, it's getting a little awkward. This move here is, I don't know that I want to be associated with that sort of conversation. So, but yeah.
All right. Well, Chad has left me, so I don't know. Maybe this is the end of the stream. Chad,
Well, you like them about 2 hours, right?
Yeah, I usually go 2 hours. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes now. I could play some branding, I suppose. That would seem appropriate. So, anyway.
Bye.
So thank you all for joining us here on the live stream, and maybe I'll play this one.
Brady G knows it all. That's my old name, G.
Up. We're not done yet. Chad, I was worried that maybe either the assassins or the traffic had ended it, but you're muted, so I can't hear you. Chad, this isn't going to do much for the audio version of this, Chad. I don't know if I can unmute you. Oh, now I got you unmuted. And then he's gone. Oh my.
Fast Brady G knows it all. That's my old name, G. Okay, now we're ready. Ready for Freddy.
Ready for Freddy. Are your knees steady? Are you rolling in a Chevy? Are you getting it ready? I took the mic straight to the top. Top of this hip-hop gang. No shame, doing it big. Akon, you see, Ludacris doing his thing for Shiga G. With the mind.
Chad, I'm doing the best I can for you, man. You're unmuted. I don't know if your cell signal is going to hold it. All right, gonna call it, my friend. Gonna call it. We'll get out of here on Psalm 1.
counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish.
The catchphrase I say go to church. And what I mean by that is, in some ways, it's you have to engage in the human relationships around you. That's like the best way to go about that. You know, you have relationship, you have a family, you have some kind of community around you, and so that's the best place to go, because in some ways that's the place that will have this procedural aspect to it that will ground the other stuff. You know, it's like if you have to, you know, to help your kids with their homework, or you have to do this kind of really grounded stuff that has very little to do with the ideology. You get engaged in other people's lives, then it binds you in a different way, right?
And then like my father would, he was going to church, and I wasn't really living with him, but he was going to church, and he would like kind of, so those are elements of this conversation. I got to go to church.
It's being part of a church is part of Christian discipleship. And in that word discipleship, there's this word discipline, which is, it's a discipline to go to church.
What would be so great about actually going to a church is like you start going to a church so that when you do need like to be prayed for, when you have something to be prayed for about, you have a place to just say that.
You're dead on right, Grizz, and that is what the church is for. To know and be known, to love and be loved, to have a place to go where people can pray for you, where they will welcome you in. And this is, again, part of why I'm, I want churches to have estuaries, because it is, I know that it is difficult in many churches for people to, in a sense, come in and bring their real self. And what I mean by that, people have to say what's on their mind, or you can't wrestle with them. It's like, so Plato, as John reminds us, is broad, so he's a wrestler. You can't wrestle over a screen. So maybe if it's paintball for Jesus, maybe it should be wrestling with Plato. Because, and in church, in a real space, now often it doesn't happen, I understand that, but at least there's a chance to actually have a relationship with grit. And that's part of why churches are local, they're relational, they're face-to-face, they're in real life.
Said about why would young people want to go to church, and I feel like I want to have some kind of dynamic message or something that if they do find some reason to come, I'm trying to fish, so I'm throwing bait and I'm trying to hook somebody. It's what Paul is doing too. He said about being evangelical, evangelism of some sort.
Well, fishers of men is
yes,
is the promise. Yes.
Yes, correct.
Possessed. We did go to church today. I took communion.
I don't go to church to think or to rationalize God. I go to church to worship Him. Right? And that's, I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. And afterwards, during coffee hour, we can all argue about the God of our understanding, right? Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that the wild twin, the thing that led to my sort of dawning to consciousness of Christianity was a 101-day vigil that I did in Forest. And I went into the forest.
You don't have to go crazy.
Yeah.
You actually have to go, you have to humble yourself and be, and do it right here, right now, right?
Get up. I like how Father Schmemann talks about it for the life of the world. He says it starts when you get up and get ready and you walk or you go to church. So you start those are simple. I get up. I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I put on clothes, I go, the things of life, and we're ascending up into heaven. You're